Um, this is the next segment in the Building Healthy Relationships series, avoiding those toxic relationships. The last time we talked about being in relationships with argumentative people, and then before that, people who gave off negative energy, and we can't really avoid that completely. That's just a given. That's a part of life. Unless we leave this life, there's no way to avoid all of that. But we can choose who our close friendships are with. We can choose who our romantic relationships are with. And if it's someone who is completely argumentative and obstinate, chances are that will end up being a toxic relationship. And even sometimes, we can't avoid it with family, but there are times that we can distance ourselves from family members who are causing us that kind of pain or frustration. So now we're going to go to people who live in the past. Now that may not seem like a big deal. It may not seem like something that would cause a poisonous atmosphere, but think about it. If it's, for instance, someone who's always bragging about a past relationship or past experience, or how much better it was in their childhood than it is now, it's just putting you down because they're just so miserable with how things are now, and they're always talking about how it was better before, instead of putting that energy into making now better. That's definitely a toxic relationship, and that's usually a jab at the other person in the relationship to try to manipulate them and make them feel bad. Also, if they're so hung up on their past mistakes that they can't move forward, that kind of baggage will follow relationships, friendships, romantic relationships. And if they're not willing to try it all, you may have to move forward without that person and just pray for them and love them from a distance. Now, I'm not saying anybody that has baggage is going to be a bad friend or a bad husband or wife. That's not what I'm saying. If they are trying, and they may have setbacks, they may have relapses. I know sometimes I think about the mistakes I've made, and I wonder, how on earth could God forgive me? Or how on earth, why do I deserve the kids I have and the husband I have when I've, made some of the mistakes that I've made? But I move on from it. I think about how good God has been to me. I think about the forgiveness and grace He's extended, the forgiveness my family has extended, and I have to learn to forgive myself. So those things may crop up. But for me as a Christian, I always know to lay it at the cross. I can kneel down at the cross. I can pray and ask the Father to help me not allow those things to control me. For non-Christians, I really don't understand how they get through, but I know that there are some that do. And they find a way to move on and, have the healthiest possible relationships that they can have here. Now, the eternities, that's a different story, but that's not what these videos are about. So someone who can't let go of the past or refuses to let go of the past. A lot of times if they refuse to let go of the past, it's because they have martyr syndrome and they want someone always feeling sorry for them. And so they'll keep the past alive, past hurts and mistakes alive, so that they can stay the center of attention. So someone who's living in the past may need to move on from there. And then for couples, for couples who are in a romantic relationship and even marriage, if sex is a priority, that is unhealthy. I do not care what the psychologist tells you. I do not care what TV tells you. I do not care what the sex therapist tells you. I don't even care what the preacher tells you. Because I've heard a lot of preachers put a lot of emphasis on the sexual relationship within the marriage and how it needs to be there and you need to be submitting to one another. If the pressure to do things that make you uncomfortable is there, if it's things you deem weird, even if it's just an overabundance and the sex is the priority, that's unhealthy. And you shouldn't be forced into that even if you're married. Now, the Bible has a lot to say about sex. It does. And that's where I say the guidelines should be for any kind of sexual relationship, is what the Bible says. However, it does not harp on it in every single chapter, in every single book, to the point that you're nothing but a sex slave within marriage. If you're involved in a sexual relationship outside of marriage, well, that's another whole matter. You should not even, from a biblical standpoint, you shouldn't even be. But if you are, If it's something that makes you uncomfortable, if it's something abusive, something you consider weird or strange, and the other person insists, your husband or wife insists, not good. And if it's not going to be corrected, not going to go to therapy, not going to consider the other person and how you feel, you may have to move on. And I know you're never supposed to get divorced for anything if you're a Christian. I know all that. That'll be for another set of videos, and we'll talk about some controversy then. However, still not what this series is about. And the other thing I want to bring out for couples is that if you're uncomfortable in certain situations, like if you like accidentally break something and your spouse lashes out at you in a violent or angry way, or if they're always criticizing the mistakes you make, and meeting new people, if you're afraid to meet new people, either because your spouse is forcing you to hang out with these people, or they're your spouse's best friends and they love them but you're very uncomfortable around them, your spouse or your boyfriend or girlfriend, fiance, whoever it is, even friends, even other friends. If you got two best friends and one best friend is bringing another set of friends into the relationship, if you're uncomfortable around them, you got to respect each other. And if they're forcing you to be friends with someone that you're uncomfortable with, that is a sign of selfishness and inconsideration and can be dangerous. So sometimes, as hard as it may seem at first, it will pay off in the long run if you walk away.